Gen X doesn't avoid falling in love. They just fall in love with one hand still resting on the doorknob. At first glance, it may look like commitment issues, emotional distance, or a person who never quite lets anyone all the way in. People might look at it as coldness or independence taken a little too far, or someone who simply isn't built for real vulnerability. And for a while, that explanation makes sense, especially for the partner standing across from that guarded, half-open door, wondering why full trust never seems to arrive, even after years of proving it. But that is not the whole story. The part people miss has less to do with fear of commitment than with fear of being caught off guard. It goes back to a house key worn around a neck, a television left on, and a very specific kind of silence that settled into a lot of American homes during the 1970s and 80s. This was the generation of empty afternoons, the original latchkey kids. Divorce rates climbed higher during their childhood than at almost any other point in history. And a lot of Gen X kids came home from school to nobody. Their parents obviously do love them, but their parents were working double shifts, or living across town in a new apartment, or simply worn down by a world that hadn't yet figured out how to support families the way it claims to now. Nobody sat these kids down and explained what was happening. They just learned it by watching furniture disappear from rooms, or by noticing that dinner was suddenly a one-person job. It was a psychological event, but nobody named it back then. It was just Tuesday. Come home, unlock the door alone, make a snack, watch some television, and sort out whatever was going on inside. Because nobody was going to ask. So they adapted the only way children know how. They stopped expecting someone to be there. They learned to lock their own doors, settle their own nerves, and read a quiet house without panicking. And somewhere in that process, they learned something far more permanent. Love can look completely stable, right up until the day it isn't. That lesson didn't disappear when they grew up. It just changed shape. Now it shows up as a relationship that looks steady from the outside, but always has a small, private exit built in somewhere, just in case. A separate bank account kept to be smart. A friend group that never fully merges with a partner's. A version of independence that gets called healthy boundaries. And sometimes it is exactly that. But sometimes it is also a quiet insurance policy against an ending that has not happened yet, and may never happen at all. The same instinct is visible in someone who can sit through an actual breakup looking almost unbothered, because some part of them has been quietly rehearsing this exact moment since they were 9 years old, sitting alone at a kitchen table that was built for 4.
Gen X didn't call that rehearsal an exit strategy. They called it being smart. They called it not getting their hopes up. They called it Tuesday again. It surfaces in the jokes, too. The offhand, "we'll just get divorced" line, dropped 3 months into a new relationship, laughed off before anyone can take it seriously, which is really just an attempt to name the fear before the fear gets a chance to name them first. Gen X didn't need a horoscope to predict heartbreak. They already had a childhood. Here's what that vigilance actually protected. It kept them from being blindsided the way they once were as kids, sitting by a window, waiting for a car that sometimes came home late and sometimes didn't come home at all. When the floor is already expected to give out, it hurts a little less when it finally does. Bracing for heartbreak, in that sense, is not the opposite of love. It is what love learned to wear after it got hurt young enough to remember exactly how that felt. But protection always costs something. What it protected
was the ability to survive loss without falling apart in front of anyone. What it damaged was the ability to be fully found by someone else. Partners of Gen X often describe a very specific kind of loneliness. The feeling of being loved, genuinely loved, but from somewhere just behind a wall they can sense and never quite locate. Not because Gen X is holding back on purpose, because some part of them never fully unlearned the idea that full surrender is how a person ends up getting hurt worst of all.
Maybe that's the part nobody says out loud. Gen X learned to love like anyone else, but they learned to love with the ending already priced in, quietly, in advance, so that if it ever came, it would find them ready instead of ruined. And that habit did not stay inside romantic relationships. Once they learned that even the people closest to them could disappear without warning, the same caution followed them into friendships, workplaces, governments, and every institution that asked for complete trust. They did not stop trusting altogether. They simply stopped giving any person or system enough power to catch them unprepared. Which is why Gen X became the generation that always expects the promise to come with an exit clause. And if you want to know why this happened to them, click this video.